when you talked a little bit about job strategy, the definition of branding is really how you present yourself, but also how others see you. So we need to have a little bit of self-reflection when we are identifying what our qualities are, and we want to make sure that others see us that way. So today we're going to talk about managing your personal brand, writing a personal brand tagline or statement, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how to use your personal brand and statement in an elevator pitch, networking, and on LinkedIn. And so let's just talk for a second about why personal branding is really important. And so looking at this slide, you'll see on the bottom it says 67% job experience, 60% culture fit. There was a survey done for recruiting managers around the nation, and they were asked to rate what they look for in their candidates. And so it was really interesting that both job experience and culture fit both came up as high importance in what recruiters are looking for in their job candidates. And this is especially important for college students because college students are going to have limited experience, right? College students are going to have a lot of education, but not as much work experience because they're being educated. And so it's really important to think about culture fit when you are applying for jobs, when you're interviewing for jobs, because most companies, unless you're in a very technical position like a nurse or an engineer or those types of jobs where you have to have really specific skill set that's demonstratable, the recruiters are going to look for how you're going to fit in with their company. And so we'll kick off with a quote from Jeff Bezos. And as I mentioned earlier, your brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. And so sometimes it's obvious what they're saying about us, and sometimes it's not. And it's definitely something that you'll want to pay attention to as we go through today's presentation and as you are starting to define your plan, your brand, and how you're going to use it. And so let's move on to creating a brand. And so creating a brand is easy because we are all who we are, right? Now, changing your brand, that can be a little harder, but it's definitely possible. It's the articulating our brand that becomes a bit of a challenge. And one of the things that we'll talk about as we go through different steps is brands will change over time. The core of your brand might stay the same, but the words may change. And it also may adjust depending on where you are in your career. And so practicing your brand, practicing about using different words, practicing how you want to present yourself is all part of defining what your brand is. All right, so let me just put up my little disclaimer before we start digging in. Personal brands are about you, and so you own it, and you own what's good for you, and you own what's bad for you. And so if you want to have a bad boy image or a bad girl image, then go for it, but own it with confidence. If you've got an image that maybe is uncomfortable to you, think about ways that you can improve that. The other piece of personal branding that's really important is sometimes our family and our friends define what our brand is. And that is something that the exercises that we are going to go through, hopefully we'll start to eliminate some of that, and we'll start to identify what our strengths are and what our values are so that we can break away from what other people are saying about us. All right, so an authentic brand highlights your strengths, your values, your passion, and purpose. So let's start with strengths. You can go ahead and take out a piece of paper and put 2 columns in. One side will be the skills that you have, and the second side will be the skills that other people think you might have. And this is going to be an exercise that you may want to share with friends or roommates or classmates to get an idea of what they think your skills are. So I will give you a second to define and fill out both of those columns. And on the screen, hopefully you're all seeing a bunch of different skills that we've laid out to kind of get your brain thinking. I'll give you a minute for that. Okay, and then we'll do the same exercise for values. And so when we talk about values, values are almost your personal compass. They provide direction for your choices and behaviors. And so we know, we usually are pretty clear on what our skills are, right? I'm organized, I can play well with others, I have leadership skills. But values are sometimes a little harder for us to identify. And so going through the same exercise as you did with skills, take a look at some of these values and think about what is important to you as you are looking for a career, looking for a job. Are you looking to work with others, or do you prefer to work by yourself? Do you want to stay local, or are you willing to travel? All those different values are going to help you form the right fit for you as you're looking for a job or an internship. Even going to grad school, your values will play into it. You give folks another minute or so. And so does anybody want to weigh in on the skills piece and the values piece? Was it easy? Was it hard? Is it something that you need to spend more time on? Curious how folks are thinking about their values and skills. Anybody want to share? Okay, we have a quiet group today. All right, the next thing we're going to look at is passion and purpose. And so these two sections, I think are a little harder.
Oh,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Denise. Just we had a comment that they needed just a little more time to
sorry, Turco.
process.
I'll go back if you'd like. Let me know when you're good.
Okay, I think you can move on now, Denise.
Oh, all good. All right, you're very welcome. All right, so then let's talk a little bit of passion and purpose. And as I was saying, I think these two sections are a little harder to work through. When we talk about our passion, we talk about what fuels our actions. Why do we get up in the morning? And how do we integrate our passions into our schooling, into our jobs, into the work that we want to do. And so when we are looking at our grid, our two columns, and we talk about listing your passions, some questions to ask yourself are, what would you do with your free time if money wasn't an issue? What are some of your favorite activities or hobbies? I like to ask students why they chose a major. I also ask students if I had a magic wand and could give them their perfect job, what would they look like? And that helps us define what their passion is. And purpose, or what I bring to the world, that's another piece that will adjust as you move through your careers. And so our purpose is more of our big picture, or what we would like to achieve. And sometimes our purpose can't be seen right out of school, but it kind of develops with our experiences and our jobs. And so the way to think about defining your purpose is, what would you like your future to look like in maybe 5 or 10 years? Kind of looking out a few years after school, and think about how your passions and your values and also your skills, how can those skills be transferred into what your purpose is? And so I'll give you guys about a minute or so to jot down some notes, but I think this part of the exercise takes longer, and it's something that will grow and morph as our experiences and as the world changes too. Okay. All right, let's do a little bit of a debrief. Does anybody want to share what they may have learned from themselves, or maybe something new that they hadn't thought about that these couple of exercises made them think about? Do any of the students on our line or any of the career advisors want to share? I can tell you, when I started my job as a career advisor, I had to think long and hard about what my brand was, because as a project manager, my brand was always around getting things done and helping people to get things done. And so that was my brand. That was what I was known for in my previous careers. And when I came here, I thought, you know what, my brand hasn't changed that much, because now my brand is more about helping students meet their goals and helping students get the things done that they want to achieve during their school time and also at post-graduation. And so it was interesting for me that even though my brand kind of shifted a little bit with my new role, it was still similar in the skills that I had were transferable from my previous jobs to what I'm doing now. And some of the skills are more highlighted and some of them are less highlighted because I've had to learn other skills. And so for me personally, it's been interesting to see what that looks like. And so I think for all of us is to remember that when we are doing branding work, it's not it's done. It's a once and done, and we never look at it again. It'll be something that's going to grow with you as you continue to grow. So anybody want to add anything to that before we move on to the next part of the presentation? Okay, let's continue on then. And so now I want to talk a little bit about brand taglines. And we're not going to do an exercise in this, but I did want to share some. So as you're working through the other 4 exercises, you can think about what your brand tagline is. And so the ones on the left are from a book called Personal Tagline, and some of them might be very familiar to you. And the ones on the right are brand taglines that have been created in the by the career advisors. And so you'll notice that they are short and sweet, right, as a tagline should be. But you can read a lot through that, especially when we look at things like helping society through education and social change. Right? There's a lot that could be brought into that tagline. And as you are talking through your elevator pitch, which we're going to do next, you'll kind of fill in specifically what those words talk about. You know, artists looking for ways to use art as a tool to manage mental health. That starts to tell us a little bit of a story about who that person is and where they, what their skills are and how they want to use their art skills in a very different area. And so um, thinking about what your tagline is a fun exercise. And I always advise people to document 5 or 10 different taglines and then try them out. Try them out with family and friends and in networking events and see what feels good to you. Because if you come up with a tagline that sounds really good, but it doesn't feel good to you, then it's probably not a tagline that you're going to really own and feel good about. And so with that, we'll finish the brand tagline section with just some advice from Simon Sinek. And this goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of that recruiters are really looking for culture fit. And so Simon agrees with that in his quote that people don't buy what you do, but they buy why you do it. And that is what your brand is in a nutshell. So now what? We've talked about skills and values. We talked about passions and purposes. We talked about brand tagline. How do we start pulling that together? So let's talk about the elevator pitch. And so elevator pitch, the 30-second infomercial, they're all the same. And the terminology for elevator pitch came about with imagining that you're in an elevator with somebody and you're on the first floor and you're going up to the 30th floor. And you have 20, 30 seconds to introduce yourself and make an introduction and make that other person want to learn more about you. And so your elevator pitch, you want it to be brief and persuasive and really quick. Maybe you're selling yourself, maybe you're selling a product, maybe you're selling a service. But the point of it is you want to be really brief, but give the most information about yourself in that time period. And so when we're talking about an elevator pitch, there's 3 proponents to it, right? The first one's pretty easy. Who are you? What do you do? What's your education status or what's your job status? What do you do? And so if we look back at our strengths and values, what are the 5 or 6 strengths that we want to highlight? And how do we put them into a sentence or 2 sentences that really show what you can do for somebody? For me, I solve problems, I help people get things done. And then what is your goal? Are you looking for a job? Are you looking for a contact? What are you looking for from that other person, and why are you having the conversation with them? And so again, elevator pitches are one of those things that are going to change based on who you're talking to, but having a baseline elevator pitch makes it easier to adjust as you go into different situations. I always like to tell students to think about what their story is. If we think about where we were children and lying in bed having a story read to us, what is it about a story that makes us want more? And so it's important to think about your elevator pitch as what is your short story? What can be told in a very short period of time? Any questions about elevator pitches? I'm going to show you, I'll put up 2 samples. I'll put this one up and then we'll show up the other ones, just so that you can see how short they should be and the amount of information that should be put into an elevator pitch. So we'll do the first one. And I won't read it, I'll let you guys all read it. And then the second one. Does anybody have any thoughts on the similarity between the two or the differences between the two? Does anybody have any thoughts on whether they're good elevator pitches or they could be a little better?
I have a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
The first one is talking about their strengths. I would probably put a little bit more attention towards supporting the claim of what those strengths are. You know, maybe a little more detail. They were a little broad in nonprofit programs and fellowships. You know, maybe put a couple of big names or something of important roles that they set and kind of draw the line a little more obviously.
Yes, and having a little more detail helps the person listening to it kind of pull together in their mind what their questions might be or maybe how they can help you. So thank you for that. I like this second one because it's really specific on what the person is asking for, looking for suggestions and advice. And so that's always important. And again, it depends on the situation and it depends on who you're talking to. Sometimes when you meet somebody the first time, it's not appropriate to ask for something specifically. If you meet somebody in the supermarket or you meet them at the gym, maybe you share something similar to that first bullet that talks about who you are and what you do, but then you're at a networking event where people are expecting, especially students, we're expecting students to ask for something, asking for advice or contacts may be appropriate. And so I always advise students to have a baseline elevator pitch, but then also to tweak it for whatever situation they're in, because every situation will be a little different. Does anybody have any other comments or questions before we move on from elevator pitch? All right, so here's my little teddy bear. So we've talked about a lot of things pretty quickly. We talked about skills. We talked about value, passion, and purpose. We talked about elevator pitches. We talked about brand tagline. And so now we've got all of these things in our little chest over here. And so what do I do with that all? How do I use it? How do I tweak it? How do I test it? And so the rest of the presentation, we're going to look at some things to keep in mind. We're going to look at different aspects of our lives that we want to make sure are consistent. They don't always have to be the same, but they definitely need to be consistent, because our goal is to create this version of ourselves, and not even create a version of ourselves, but be able to articulate who we are consistently across all of the different aspects of our life. And especially for students that are looking for post-graduation jobs, you don't want to make it hard for recruiters and hiring managers to find you or to understand what your story is. I used to tell people all the time, if a candidate is making my life hard, they'll probably make my life hard as a worker, and so I probably wouldn't hire them. And so we don't want to make life hard. We want to be consistent. We want to make sure that we pay attention to the details. So let's get into some of those details. And so some things to think about when you are kind of building your story, right? Do you have an email address that projects a professional image? Especially if you're looking for a job and you're going to be getting emails from recruiters and and hiring managers. So maybe you have two email addresses, one for your job life and one for your personal life. Do you have a signature line in your emails? Does it have your name, your phone number, your LinkedIn page link? Maybe your tagline is in there. You want your emails to be very professional. What does your social media presence look like? There's a lot of talk about how hiring managers and recruiters do go on Google and Google students' names. And so you want to take a look at to make sure that your Facebook and your Instagram and your LinkedIn and all those social media tools that you're using are consistent, and they are and that you realize they're building your brand. And so they don't all have to be the same, right? Because Facebook is a little more personal than LinkedIn, but you still want to understand that your LinkedIn is introducing you to the world with a brand that it should at least be consistent with Facebook. They shouldn't be, LinkedIn, I don't drink, and then your pictures on Facebook have you with beers in your hand, right? LinkedIn might talk about the fact that you are a math major, and Facebook goes, oh my God, I can't stand my calculus class, right? So you want to be careful with that consistency across social media. Professional headshot, really, really important. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and sometimes decisions might be made about how somebody's headshot looks or how professional it is. Can you see somebody's eyes? Can you see their facial expressions? If a student's sitting in front of me and they look bored, then I notice they're bored. And so having a professional headshot is important. For some students, we may need to have an online portfolio or a website to showcase your work, whether it's your artwork or computer programming or other types of things. Again, there should be consistency with your brand. A student business card, which is a great tool to have when you're doing your networking. I like to recommend to people that the front of their best business card has all their contact information, and the back of their business card has their tagline on it. And so if I meet a student and they give me their business card, I remember, oh yeah, that's the student who is in the nursing program or is in this program. And you don't want to fill the business card with so much information that somebody can't take notes on it, because I'll jot down notes on it so I can remember what that was about when I left a networking event. Voicemail greeting that conveys your best self. This is a really big one. I'm sure my fellow career advisors will agree with me. We call students a lot and we get their voicemails, and sometimes I'm not even sure I have the right number, or the voicemail is very casual and not a great first impression if a recruiter or hiring manager is calling you. And then of course there's the resume CV that is really targeted, and that's a whole nother webinar that I think is coming down the road. But the important part, and the reason why I put it on this particular slide, is you want to make sure that there's consistency. So you have the same email on your resume that you use, that's on your LinkedIn, that's on your business card. You want to be consistent. You don't want to have lots of emails and phone numbers, and people get confused on how to get in touch with you. So for the items on this slide, the consistency really matters. All right, so let's get to the next one. All right, some other things to think about when we talk about how we can control our brand, right? So if you're known for being late all the time, then start to think about how you can be more prompt, right? You don't want to be known as the person that's going to be always late, because that doesn't really bode well for a job or an internship. If you're seeking mentors, right, you want to find mentors that are going to be able to help you. And when you're looking for mentors, you're going to want to be really clear on who you are, what your brand looks like, because mentors are not going to take on just anybody. They're going to take on students that they think they can help, that present themselves well, because mentors are guiding and helping and putting you in contact with people. And so they don't want to waste their contacts with with students or others that are not going to present well. We talked about networking events and conferences, and we'll talk a little more deeply in the next slide about networking, but that is a great place to present your brand and also to try things out. I wouldn't go too crazy on trying things out because the first impression is sometimes your last impression. So you want to be careful with that. Confidence about your professional appearance and grooming. We talked about social media. And now that you've got a good brand and you have maybe an idea of things you want to start researching, following and joining groups that you're interested in. If I'm a hiring manager for a company and I see a student following my company, I'm going to be interested in that student because I know that they're interested in our company. And then I always recommend to people to Google yourselves regularly. You never know what's going to pop up, especially when folks are, posting pictures and telling stories and all those types of things. So every once in a while, you want to Google yourself and see what pops up. One of the things that's always a challenge is if you have a common name and there are other people that pop up that aren't you, that may be different from your brand, or they will be different from your brand, but also maybe their brand isn't as strong as yours, or maybe they've got some things in their past that wouldn't look well. And so when things like that happen, you want to make sure that, again, you've got consistency amongst all your stuff, so people will look immediately and be like, oh, that's not the Denise Korn we're looking at, right? Because we've seen her professional headshot. We know what her professional email is, all those types of things. And so that's something to pay attention to too. Does anybody have any questions, or did I miss anything on ways to show your brand, use your brand, and the consistency part of it? Anybody want to share anything? All right. Well, I promised we would talk a little bit about networking. And again, that is another noon Zoom coming up. So we did want to just touch upon it a little bit. We talked about elevator pitch. We talked about having a presence. And again, that is your brand. Making strategic connections with employers, recruiters, and alumni in your career and field. But don't lose sight of casual connections. We always think about networking as being something really formal, right? I'm going to a networking event. I'm going to this webinar or this in-person class, and I'm going to have to network and I'm going to have to talk to people, right? Networking is not always that structured. Networking can be standing in line at the grocery store, sitting poolside in your neighborhood, getting gas, right? So think about networking, both formal and informal. And I find the informal networking is a great place to test out some new verbiage, maybe a new tagline, right? Because if you meet somebody that maybe is not really going to help you in your network, or is not a key person in your network, you might never see them again. So if you blow your tagline, probably no harm, no foul. So think about networking from both a formal and informal perspective. When you are networking, if you are meeting people and you offer them something or they ask you to follow up, make sure you do that. Make sure that you are being responsible and that you're delivering on the commitments you're making. Having a handshake used to be really important when we were allowed to handshake. It will be more important when we're allowed to start doing that again, but having eye contact with somebody you're talking to, acknowledging them, fist bump, whatever the right way to do that now is important. You want to concentrate on the person that you're talking to. And then there's always the thank you note or email, especially when you're at a formal event. Informal events, you don't have to, send a thank you to the guy at the gas station that you started talking to, unless maybe they have a good lead for you. But formal networking events, if you are spending a lot of time with somebody, talking with them, And even especially when it leads to a follow-up conversation, you do want to send a thank you. And then we have LinkedIn, which is a really great way to start to build your network, and it will stay with you your entire career. And you'll notice that as you progress through your education and as you progress through your work life, that your LinkedIn will progress with you. And all of a sudden you'll realize, and I'll age myself, I've got folks that I met on LinkedIn when LinkedIn first started to become popular. And they are still people that I talk with today. So LinkedIn is a really powerful tool. And again, we want our branding to be consistent. And so we want to make sure that we have our professional headshot. We want to have a customized URL. Right now, LinkedIn puts all the numbers at the end, but you can go in and change that. And if you're not sure how to do that, you can ask me or one of the other career advisors, and we can teach you how to do that. And then really important, and we just did a LinkedIn class last week, and the gentleman that was teaching the class said that this tagline is one of the most important aspects of your LinkedIn account, because it's a real good, forgot the word, snapshot of who you are. And so just saying that you're an FGCU student really doesn't say a lot about you, especially since FGCU will be up on the right-hand corner. And so think about some of the skills that you have, or think about your tagline and put it there so people start to understand, who is this person? This is somebody I might want to know about. Then the next important piece is the about statement. And I like to tell students that this is an expansion of their elevator pitch, right? This is your story, especially your education and work life story. And the first couple of lines are seen by everybody that go to your account, and you want to catch them in those couple of lines, and then you want to expand and have them expand to learn more about you. So that's a really important piece. And then the last important piece is the skills section on the bottom. And this is an area that you can control. The little green pinpoint lets you pinpoint your top 3 skills, right? What are the top 3 skills that you want folks to know? Are you a problem solver? Are you a salesperson? You want to be able to identify those, because recruiters and hiring managers are going to look at that piece of it when they're scrolling through LinkedIn accounts, and they're going to look at your tagline and your about statement. All right, so I wanted to just share Simon's LinkedIn page. And the reason why is his is really all about his branding. I love the fact that his tagline is being an optimist and an author. And his about statement talks about what he does, and when you expand it, it talks about why he does it. And so he doesn't talk about the fact that, you know, he writes blogs and he writes books and he does articles. He talks about what his purpose is. And it's fun to look at his page, because I think it's a great example of taking your brand and really fine-tuning it and making people want to learn more about you and want to hire you or want to follow you. And so there are a lot of really good examples on LinkedIn. And if you're not sure, you know, just start stalking people and see what their LinkedIn accounts are saying, and it will help you deliver or help you articulate what you want your message to be. All right, I thought you guys probably thought we'd never get to the end, but we're almost there. So here are some final thoughts. Going back to our job search strategy, we talked about the brand being the thread that ties it together. And you are going to use, your brand is going to grow as you go through the strategy, and it is going to change. But also you're going to use that brand to highlight different aspects of yourself as you're going through each steps of the strategy. And so just remember that your personal brand is a journey. There's a lot of self-discovery in that. Sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's a little hard to deal with, and then you have an opportunity to change it. And you want to always remember that you can shape your brand, and you should shape your brand. You don't want other people to do that for you. And that's a really important point to keep in mind. So with that, I will show you all of the great resources that your career advisors are available to help you with, including brand management. We are doing remote appointments right now, and we're doing lots of presentations and classes and groups. And so if you're looking for some support on any of these things or other things related to your job search strategy, please go ahead and visit our website, and you can make an appointment to see one of us. You can see a lot of different resources that we have. You can see a listing of all the great events that we have coming up.